Dead Space 2023, the remake. How bad is it? It's bad. And if you've listened to any of my how bad is it conclusions before, you would know that I divide this into different sections. Positives, the things that I think are neither here nor there, it's just really an observation, and then the negatives. When it comes to Dead Space 2023, I have 3 positives. One thing that's not really here nor there, subjective, and probably about a dozen negatives here. So I'll just start with the first positive. The graphics are impressive. As you see, there's been major updates to the graphical engine. They don't use the same one. This one's running on Frostbite, the one that DICE uses for the Battlefield games. But you can see that there's been a major overhaul here. They added HDR, ray tracing. In my opinion, HDR is a must-have for any type of survival horror games just because of the dark environments. So the game looks pretty good overall. The only exception I would say here is the explosions. I'm going to be shooting this barrel in a second here. Yeah, it's just all flames. There's like no smoke, no nothing. It's just, I thought the explosions looked very bland. The second plus. The aiming controls are improved, and what I mean here is the dead zones. In the first Dead Space, or the original Dead Space, the dead zones either gave you too much feedback or too little feedback. It was very hard to do precision aiming, which, as you can see here, is very easy, very fluid. It almost feels like well, just say it, a modern game, because it is. That was something they needed to improve on in this remake, and they did it. Plus number 3, the awful, terrible, god-awful asteroid shooting sequence from the first game was removed. That's what you're looking at right now. I was wondering what this game was going to do to replace this god-awful, terrible scene where all these asteroids are flying at you and they're all randomized. You never get the same pattern twice. It was just pure hell to try to get through. So they replaced it with this. This wasn't much of an improvement, but it's certainly better than what you did in the first game, just because what you did in the first game was really frustrating. Here you've got multiple different turrets that you align with, and then you have to manually aim at incoming asteroids. Now what made this a pain in the ass, and I'll get to this later when I talk about the control layout, is you have to aim while holding down the left trigger, of course, but then to fire you have to hit the A button. You don't hit the right trigger. The control layout was all sorts of messed up, but overall, this was an improvement over the original game asteroid shooting sequence. This is the only subjective thing I have in my review here, was the Leviathan boss fight was a little bit different from the first game. It's basically the same concept. It just felt better here because of the improved controls. But I don't really know if this boss fight was any better in this game or if it was better in the first. I do know that in the original game, it was a hell of a lot harder. So, take it for what you will. You either liked this boss fight more than the originals, or you didn't. Now we're getting into the negatives. The game is woke as hell. Let's watch the intro to the first one. This is from last year's Halloween Horror.
Isaac, it's me. I wish I could talk to you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything. I wish I could just talk to someone. It's all falling apart here. I can't believe what's happening. It's strange. Such a little thing.
How many times you watched that thing? Guess you really miss her.
Take a look at Kendra.
Don't worry, we're almost there. You'll be able to look her up once we're on board. Sounds like you do have a lot of catching up to do.
And also take a look at the 2 pilots.
All this trouble over that chunk of rock.
Deep space mining is a new...
Okay, now I'm going to be referencing this guy, and I reference him a lot throughout the game. This guy right there. See him? He's right over the left shoulder of Kendra. That's the guy I call Monkey Man just because of how big his brow looks. He just like full Magnon. And then there's the other pilot. The Asian guy right there. Chen. Now you see the cast of the crew here. Let's show you the opening for the new Dead Space. Let's see what kind of can of worms I open with this game.
It's me. I wish I could talk to you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about everything.
Well, they made her old and ugly.
Wish I could
That
talk
certainly
to you.
fits the DEI description. Their game plan, their MO.
I can't believe what's happening. Strange.
Make all women ugly. Yep, that's definitely woke right there.
That's her. Nicole?
Yeah. First I've heard from her.
That's supposed to be Kendra.
We're 5 minutes out. You still got that thing on repeat? Guess you really miss her.
Fishermer is not a job you turn
Okay, now
down
Kendra
with
was
6
pretty
months
hot in the
apart.
first one.
Calls. It's rough.
She's got cheeks like a man and a fucking jawline like a boxer.
I don't blame you. I'd listen to my girlfriend over Hammond.
Okay, and she wasn't a dyke in the original either.
So you keep saying.
Here we go. Nice clean re-entry.
Okay, so they made Kendra a lesbian for no other reason than to be fully woke. She's also much, much more heavily clothed. They gave her man face, which you probably heard me say, and right there. Take a look to the right shoulder, over the right shoulder of Hammond, who's the black guy in the middle. Where's Monkey Man? You got the Asian pilot to the left of Hammond, and not to the right, you got a new pilot. They race swapped the pilot out of there. Is there anything more racist than race swapping? The game's totally freaking woke. 100% totally woke. Now, players like myself, once we heard about all these things, I ditched the game. That's it. I played this on Game Pass just because I have a Game Pass subscription, but I never would have played it otherwise. See, you got Shen still right there. But there you got the race swap pilot. That covers my first 3 negatives, which was the game's woke as fuck. Kendra is a lesbian and looks manly. In fact, it's not just Kendra, it's all the women in this game. Every single one has very large cheekbones, a large masculine-looking jaw. Here's more woke imagery. You'll see these propaganda posters posted all throughout the game. Each and every single poster just spells diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, if you would take a look at EA's goals, let me see if I could bring them up here. Their mission statement. Okay, this is part of EA's goals. Our people an inclusive culture. This wasn't the thing I was looking for specifically. Here we have it. Inclusive culture, listening. They don't listen. If it's not part of their messaging, they don't want to hear it. And here you have all the different woke groups that they're part of. They're proud to showcase these because they're like tokens, trophies, if you will. They're just virtuous pats on the back so EA can feel good about themselves. More. Pay equity. That means you could do a shitty job and get paid just as much as someone that's working their ass off. Now, why would a game company care about these types of things? The Paris Agreement, Global Green Team. This almost sounds like, oh, what do we got here? The World Economic Forum. Sustainable Development Goals. This is from almost 10 years ago. Promote gender equality and empower women. Ensure environmental sustainability. Global Partnership for Development, which means everyone has to be on the same page. So isn't it coincidental that you have all this woke gaming that lines up perfectly with the World Economic Forum? Which leads me to my next negative, trans bathrooms. This leads more into the inclusivity, and I find this a bit more insidious in this game. Because there's only one reason why you would put something in here. It wasn't in the original. It has no place here. But they want to put it in here to make you think that they've already won. You can't do anything about it. Another negative. The control layout is not good. Zero gravity boosting often ends in landing. Now, as I already said, the targeting mechanics for this particular sequence are a bit troublesome. Now, if you want to say, well, They left the right trigger available so that you can shoot if there's oncoming enemies or anything like that, and then... Oh, here we go. Bugs. I might as well get to this while I'm here. The game's buggy. As you can see, I got hit by an asteroid and I went through the map. Definitely not supposed to happen for such a big AAA game to still have a bug like this. Totally uncalled for. But let's get back to the controls. You could say that, well, they wanted to, since you could see an enemy is hitting me there, they wanted you to be able to do this and shoot at the same time. Okay, well, that's gameplay design. Just don't put any enemies in these sequences. It's not that hard. But the thing that I find the most infuriating is if you're about this close to the ground whenever you go to boost, which is holding both shoulder buttons down at the same time, that's also the takeoff and land buttons. You'll just go straight back down to the ground. You can't boost. There's so many times when I was playing through this game where I was almost cursing and screaming. Like, it got so frustrating and infuriating every time you get in one of these sequences, especially with the second Leviathan fight. Actually, no, the third Leviathan fight, which I'm pretty sure they added to this game because I thought there was only 2 Leviathan fights in the first one, or I should say the original. But you would go to lift off and then try to boost somewhere and you would just land again and you get hit. Beyond infuriating. Whoever created these controls must have been the first game they've ever worked on. It was beyond stupid. In the original game, Isaac Clarke was a little bit younger. In this game, as you can see, he's quite a bit older. In the first game, he looked like maybe mid-20s, somewhere around there. Nicole was younger too. In this game, both Isaac and Nicole are much, much older. Early 40s, mid-40s, I don't know, but they're definitely older. Now, why did they do this? The only thing I can think of is because something that one of these DEI lovers on Twitter tweeted out was that they wished about some time in gaming that they make manifest where there's less or no able-bodied white men in gaming. So they probably made Isaac older just so he's not able-bodied. Like, if you take a look at Hammond, there, he's not older. In fact, I would argue that Hammond looks a little bit younger than he did in the first game. But why didn't they make him older too? Because he's black? These are questions for the developers. More diversity posters! Another negative I've already mentioned is the uglification of women. Now, it's not just Kendra, as I've said, or Daniels in this game. It's pretty much everyone. Look at her across. Massive cheekbones, massive jaw, very round face, just does not look feminine at all. Like, not one bit. Now, why would you make all the women in the game ugly? None of the men share the same burden. I mean, it's not like Isaac Clarke looks hideous or Hammond for as long as he's alive, like he looks extremely bad neither. No, they make all the women look very, very masculine. I can't see this as anything other than sexist and misogynistic from the people that complain about sexism and misogyny all the time. The next thing on my list of negatives here is the dialogue is much more juvenile in this game. When I was playing through the original last year, there wasn't really anything that stuck out to me that kind of sounded... Well, if you want to talk about like the impact that juvenile dialogue has on games. Forspoken, another woke game that failed miserably. A lot of people ripped on that just because of just how juvenile the dialogue was. Now, playing through this, I noticed that the dialogue sounded very cringe a lot of the times. The writers of the games usually put in a good job making the game sounding good, presentable, proper grammar, you know, all that stuff. A lot of attention to detail, where in this game, it felt like those things were kind of glossed over. It just sounded much more juvenile to my ears than I would have liked. Another negative here. The clearance system sucks dick. I hated the clearance system in this game. This was not in the original game at all. what it was in the original game, if you came across, boxes, lockers, anything like that, you could open all of them. Sometimes you had to come across doors that required a power node for you to open. They had a lot of goodies in them. But this game required you to have clearance. Now, I'm not sure what the reasoning behind this was. I kind of thought that maybe they didn't want to give the player too many resources since there's so much backtracking in this game. But all it ends up doing is becoming a pain in the ass to the player because there's no real indicator on the map where these locked boxes are. And then there's somehow to get maximum clearance, which I didn't discover in this game, which means that there's going to be a lot of stuff you don't open if you get it. It just felt like a huge loss for this game, and a shining example of where the developer thought that this was a really good idea, and it turned out just not to be. There should have been no clearance system. They should have kept it the way that the first game was, where if you wanted to insert a power node to open up a door, you could have done it. But the clearance system was just flat out stupid. Something I forgot to write down here that pertains to the controls and the gameplay mechanics is, in the first game, or in the original, which you're seeing now, when you get into the anti-gravity, he kind of has like some sort of grav boots. It almost kind of reminds you of Ratchet and Clank. And then if you want to move around in anti-gravity, you propel yourself towards a specific target. I like that system a lot better than what they do in the newer game, or the remake, which is just allow you to float around. If they would have stuck with this original mechanic, you wouldn't have had the problem where you're constantly landing when you want to try to boost. Some things are just better off left alone. Something else I didn't like was the ending. They changed up the ending entirely. Now in the first game, or the original, what you're seeing here is, he's always seeing images of Nicole. He thinks she's real. He came here to try to rescue her. But in reality, as Kendra's trying to show him in this scene, she never really existed. It was the marker allowing Isaac to see hallucinations of Nicole. Essentially, the marker using Isaac as a puppet to manifest its will. What they did in the remake, same exact scene. You see Nicole, you see the marker, but they changed it up a bit. For some reason, they thought it wise to have Kendra hold a gun to Nicole's head. And of course, Isaac does what he does in the first, or the original game, which is it shows basically Nicole's suicide letter. Now they changed the wording here, so pay attention to the subtitles. A lot of this wording was added, and it didn't need to be added. In fact, I think it just added another layer of confusion onto the story, like what they're talking about right here. She was talking to the marker? Why? How does that enhance the story? She said, "Make this stop," and she thought that it understood. That wasn't in the original, and the original was better off for it. And then we cut to the Scooby-Doo-like ending here. Oh my god, it was that lady from hydroponics the entire time! And both the females look like men. So, in my opinion, they butchered the ending pretty bad. You still have this little bit at the end here where it lets you know that something kind of stayed with Isaac. And that the series isn't done just yet. And as a result of all the people hearing what was going on with Dead Space, because when I first heard that Dead Space was getting a remake, I'm like, good. That was one of my favorite survival horror games of that generation. A lot of people heard about the wokeness and the transgender bathrooms. I said, I'm not touching it. I'm just not doing it. I'm not supporting that shit with my money. I'm not doing it. Apparently enough people did that, exactly what I did, that Dead Space 2 remake of it was in the works, and it got axed by EA because of subprime sales. Now, here's what I think's a little bit telling at the end of this article here, and this isn't Grums if you want to rip on my source, this is Game Rant. They're not exactly known for being anti-woke. It says right here, it is unclear whether these supposedly lackluster sales were weak to the point of the company losing money on the remake. Based on EA Motive's headcount, the average gross salary for game developers in the studio's general area, and the fact that Dead Space Remake spent around 3 years in active development, it can be roughly estimated that the project would have been broken even with around 500,000 sales. That's not a lot of sales for such a big AAA game. I mean, now these corporations always lie about the numbers for sales when things go wrong. They're more than happy to show the sales numbers whenever it's good. But then you also have things like this going on. This is Master of the TDS. He's always exposing bot networks for these games. Like right here, he's talking about Star Wars Outlaws, but they did this. EA did the same thing for Dead Space. I can't find the specific example of it on here, but all these big publishers, doesn't matter if it's Sony, if it's Ubisoft, they all do these bot networks things. So it gives you the impression that the game's doing a hell of a lot better than it actually is when you find out the reality that the game's not doing all so well. So you got the woke gamers out there going, well, what the hell, I thought the game did great. No, it didn't. I mean, if you need any more evidence on people not wanting all this woke bullshit in games, just look at the last examples, the last biggest failures. Flintlock, Concord, Dustborn. I mean, hey, what do you need to say? People were tired of woke.